Right, bishops in the open are better than knights. We all know this, that open positions favour the bishop. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I look at a position like this and sort of theoretically the bishop's better, so you sort of just carry on. But I think I'm sort of more alien to this position, or this position's more alien to me in terms of sort of what on earth I should do other than just get my king in the middle. Um, than the starting position in chess. In fact, I mean, I could see this sort of position. I could sort of wander around like the Belper Club, see this position on one of the boards, and then just agree a draw because it's almost like, oh well, we've played enough of the game now, so yeah, this is the end game and it's equal still, so yeah, let's just agree a draw. But in fact, Black should play on here. Black should definitely try to play for the win. But how that win's achieved is sort of a bit of a mystery, and I personally can't visualize how it happened. So this game's kind of very interesting to sort of show how it happened, and not necessarily by force. You sort of Black's just better, but that doesn't mean that it's can be won against an engine, for example. Like White's got lots of defensive resources, but in the game it's fails to find them, and not in a sort of horrendous blunder way either. It's just easier to play for Black. So both sides just sort of get their kings into the middle. I think everyone could do that, right? And it's like, okay, what next? White plays this move, which is just a good move. Get your pawn off the light square onto a dark square. This is a pawn advance you sort of want to play anyway. And then this next move by Black's very good because it signals a plan. And it's bishop c8. The bishop's coming here to check the king. And that will force the white king, to move one way or the other. Which isn't that dissimilar to, if you remember, opposite coloured bishops and the two connected passed pawns, where if the attacking side's won it, they play their bishop into a place where they sort of shoot across the pawns, and the king's got to make a decision. And once the king's made that decision, the opposing king then makes their way round to another square. And it's a kind of a similar thing here. If we end up with a pawn imbalance in bishop versus knight, where one side's got a passed pawn on one side and the other side's got a passed pawn on the other, we know the passed pawns, it usually favours the side with the bishop, and there's quite a few resultant positions in a sec where that's exactly what happens. Anyway, White should play apparently f3, bishop a6 check, and take the king this way. So the white king's gone that way, the black king comes this way, and then knight c2, and sort of just guarding these two squares. Bishop f1, another pawn on the dark square. Bishop back to a6. Knight d4, giving up the b4 square, but don't want to go there now because knight c6 check will pick up the a7 pawn. So bishop back to b7 to guard the c6 square, so king b4 is absolutely a threat now. King d3, king b4, king c2, bishop to d5, king b2. And black's got a big space advantage. This pawn's fixed on a white square, but how's black breaking through? G6 say, king c2, a6, king back to b2. I mean, black's still better, but it's tricky to see how progress is made. This is sort of a stubborn defence. So anyway, that's what Dvoretsky reckons, and some other people as well. I think Averbaka got involved in helping out with that defensive line as well at some point with some recommendation or other. But you could see that was kind of quite a stubborn setup. Instead, knight f3 was played in the game, and here comes black's plan. You're going to shoot across the... Well, not shooting across anything really, just forcing this king to make a decision. King c3 was played in the game. If king e3... I think that's sort of much of a muchness, but it depends what white does next. So king c5. Now this is the bit where if white just play something sensible like knight d4. We're not a million miles off where we were a second ago, in fact, in that other f3 line. You know, the king can't come to b4 straight away because knight c6 check would pick up the a7 pawn. So we might see bishop f1, g3, bishop back to a6. Black's just kind of trying to put white in zugzwang. Knight f5, g6, just knight back to d4. And, I mean, the engine's saying minus 0.5. So, again, it's hard for black, but it was better, I suppose, when the pawn was on f3, but in the other line. But, it's not particularly clear. But anyway, in this position, instead of just doing something like that, just sort of being a stub and taking a passive defence, if white just goes for it, because there's a pawn on offer here, just start liquidating pawns. Knight g5, obviously forking those two pawns. The black king will just come in and have your b3 pawn. And this is a complete nightmare for the knight. The engine's now saying minus 2.8. Yeah, sure, white might be able to carve out a passed pawn on the king side, but it's just going to be too late. And yeah, you can see that that's a much better position for black. So as soon as you get a sort of passed pawn on one side of the board versus the other, it's going to favour the side with the bishop, especially here with this rook's pawn. So back in this position, if you're sort of defending this with white, you really don't want to start swapping this for pawns over here. You really don't. Anyway, in the game, king c3 was played. Went that way. h6. Knight came to d4. g3 is slightly better, apparently. In fact, it's a lot better. g3 is the top engine move. Just another pawn on a dark square. But knight d4 is only slightly worse than that, according to the engine, for example. Now, at this point, black should take advantage and come in. King e4. Okay. Again, just let the a7 pawn go if white wants it. Because as soon as we get an imbalance on the board, it's going to favour the side with the bishop. Knight back to b5, king f4, knight into d6. Save that f pawn. White might try and be stubborn with something like h5. And you just come and attack that pawn. Bishop f3. And you can see that in a minute black's going to have this passed pawn versus white having this one, but it's going to again favour the side with the bishop, engine saying minus 2.2. So yeah, king e4. In the game, g6 was played. That was given a sort of question mark just because king e4 should have been played. Knight to c2, then the king does come into e4. Knight e3, f5, and all of a sudden, you know, the white king sort of away from the action, and it's creeping up to minus 1.4 now. King d2, f4, knight into g4. That was the right way to go. If knight c2, and Dvoretsky says that's just hopeless. Bishop f1, knight e1, king f5, f3, g5, a swap off on g5, but take back with the king because we're coming to g3. Look how the bishop and pawn completely stop the king from doing anything. You can see how that's just over, and the white knight is tied down to the defense of g2. And yeah, this is just going to be a monster against the knight. Minus 4.6 that lies. So yeah, knight g4, much better move. Just keep the knight on that side of the board, just desperately trying to defend that side of the board. h5, knight f6 check, king f5. In the game, knight d7 was played, but apparently that's horrendous. White should have shown more grit. This is Dvoretsky's words again. By playing knight h7, and you can, when you look at the example line, you can see what he's talking about. So yeah, knight h7. So when the king comes to g4, we've got knight f8, and just swapping a pair of pawns on the same side. That can't be bad for white, can it? King back to g5, knight e5, king f5. Now here's a question for you. What do you think of this move? white to play, can you play knight d3? Because it gives black the chance to go into a pawn ending. Alright, the bishop's better than the knight, but can you judge that pawn ending? Or imagine you're black and white's just played that move. Can you judge that pawn ending? Is that a one pawn ending? Really hard, in my view, to work that out. But you'd have to sit there and work it out. I mean, it's -6.5. You know, like, this is a good example, by the way, of when people say, oh, the engine said I was plus 20 billion and I threw it away. Oh, I'd beaten him. It's just like, yeah, we hadn't really, had you. It's like, it kind of doesn't really matter that an engine has analysed this all the way to the end, and it's probably analysed it towards black having a queen against 2 pawns or something, and that's why it's -6.5. But it's very, very hard to see this. You know, look at the reason it's won. So bishop takes d3, king takes d3, king g4. And I'm just going to, that king g4 is the only winning move straight away. Okay, so it's like, oh yeah, I had -6.5. It's like, you did, okay, fine, but you have to know that king g4 is the only winning move there. King e2. What do you think of that move? Doesn't win. Doesn't win. Throws away the win. Okay. A6 is alright. A5 throws away the win. H4 also is alright. So H4 and A6. So there you go. Your only 2 winning moves there are H4 and A6. I'm saying all this to the sort of the hypothetical person who claims that, oh, I should have just swapped the knight and yeah, I was won. It's like, all right, mate. You were won. But you'd have to know that king g4 was the only move. H4 and A6 are the only moves here. Let's see why. H4, B4. Then we play A6. It's an opposition thing. I mean, I'm not saying that was mind-bogglingly difficult to find, but I am saying it's difficult enough that we can't just trivially say the engine says I was -6.5 and therefore I was won. It just doesn't work like that. And again, in this position, black has only 1 winning move. You'd think it would be f3, wouldn't you? f3 just looks so tempting. It doesn't win. It really just doesn't win. Let's have a look at it. King g1. White's going to get this pawn and get back to the c1 square on time. I presume. I mean, I can't see how else that would be a draw. But it doesn't win. f3 is not good enough. Black has only 1 winning move here, which is king f5. And then that's the opposition. King e1, king e5. Okay. Again, king e4 throws away the win. White comes in and takes the opposition. Anyway, I mean, this video is about knight versus bishop, and bishops are better in an open position, but we've got knight d3 cannot be played here because the pawn ending's 1. But wow, you've got to see all of that reasons the pawn ending's 1. There was lots of reserve tempi being used. There was opposition. It was, you know, that was hard in my view. Yeah. Anyway, knight f3. Bishop b7. King e2, a5. Knight d4 check, king e4, knight c2. Then we've got f3. f3 check, g takes f3, king f4. So, you know, you can see it was a more stubborn defence back in this position to play that knight h7. It led to all those complications. I actually think, in a way, if you're playing this against a human and you've analysed knight f3, he's not going to go too well for you, because ultimately black is going to be able to play f3 and push this h pawn one day. maybe play knight d3 and let them have a go at the pawn ending, because you have to play that pawn ending extremely well. Back in this position, though, in the game, knight d7 was played, and bishop c8. Excellent technique. I'm quoting now. Then the knight went to f8. If it sort of tries to, it sort of traps itself there. But if it goes to c5, then we see king g4, and you can see that that's just gone. The knight's too far away from the action. So the knight went to f8, just at least trying to hit the g pawn. G5, and now white has to play g3, because if that pawn is taken, king takes g5, f3 say, and the knight's lost. Just going to come and win the knight. So yeah, g3, g takes h4, g takes h4, king into g4, knight g6, and now white's just going to run out of moves. We're just going to see a sort of zugzwang. That's the h pawn gone, and the game carried on for a few more moves, but you can see that this is now gone. And he finally resigned there. Checkmate in 11, apparently. So yeah, I mean, I sort of enjoyed going through that. Like I say, it's bishop versus knight. We know the open positions, the open board favours the bishop. But like, what's your plan? How do you convert this? It's almost like the start of a game of chess that's a different game of chess. You know, it's sort of, how do you go about it? You know, both sides bring their kings into the middle. White plays a good move there with h4, and black had a plan. It was to bring the bishop round here, make the king decide one way or the other, and then go the other way with the king. And if you're playing the side with the bishop, try and create that imbalance if you can. Sometimes it might get a little bit risky. There was in the bishop versus knight passed pawn video, we saw a position where it was black with the knight, with that already had a passed pawn on a4. It was quite dangerous, and actually black ended up winning that game. But so sometimes it might be risky. You know, you've got to weigh that up. And but in this particular game, I mean, lots of errors were made on both sides, but eventually it was the creation of that imbalance. That's where the knight h7 was much more of a gritty response, and you know, eventually we do see a passed pawn being carved out on the h file, and that's done. You know, and even in the middle of that, we had where was it, back at the knight's d7 stage? Was it somewhere around? No, it was earlier than that. Here, yeah, where the knight h7 line, and in the middle of bishop versus knight, you've got to reckon with not that move, but is it safe to put my knight on d3? Does black win the pawn ending? I'm in time trouble. I don't know. Let's just go for it. And then black's like, is that pawn ending won? Yeah, really, really hard stuff on the pawn ending sort of tangent. But hey, that might have been White's best try at a defence, to sort of offer that pawn ending. That would solve the problem that your knight's not as good as the bishop, although it is a lost pawn ending if White finds all those moves. You know, but king g4, only winning move. And in this position, h4 and a6 are the only winning moves. f3 messes it up, a5 messes it up. a6 only winning move, that was a bit more obvious. And now king f5, only winning move. You've got to take the opposition. Right, next, this is a game from 1987 where Karpov is white, nobody less, and it's black to play. What would you do? What would you do as black? In the game, black played knight takes e4, it's easy to sort of criticise that decision in hindsight. I think, you know, and there's a very obvious principle that's just been contradicted, not applied, that should have been applied. I suppose if you're unsure, play the principled move, but it's not as simple as that, because the player playing black in this position actually had quite a clever little tactic lined up, but just miscalculated one element of it. I think Dvoretsky thinks, actually, and I agree with the guesswork, as it were. But the principled move is, if you've got a knight against a bishop, you don't want pawns on both sides of the board. So knight takes a4. But even the principal move comes with sort of a problem, in that your knight's now dominated. And that's the knight trapped on the edge of the board, and it's got to get back via the protected c5 square, at which point white can take. And then you've got to judge that king and pawn ending. Okay, so this isn't easy. But king d6 is a draw if you look at the various white possibilities. If king b5, knight c5, takes, h4, h6, king c4, king c6, and if e5, we've got h5. And black's got the opposition. Black that's just completely drawn. That was king b5. What if white sort of analyzes all of that coming and plays the slightly sneakier king b4? So when the knight comes back to c5, takes, king b5. So it's now black's turn to move in this position. Black's got this brilliant g5 move. In fact, that's the only drawing move. Anything else, black's dead, basically. Any push of the h-pawn, h6 or h5, h6 gets met with h4. I presume h5 does too, actually. h5 gets met with, well, there's other winning moves, but h4 is the best move, yeah. But yeah, none of that. Black plays g5. Draw. How about that for a brilliant move? So yeah, king b4 doesn't work, and then back in this position, last try is maybe e5 check, king back to e6, h4, h6, king b5, knight c5. See a swap off, and then g5. Same drawing resource. So yeah, so it turned out that the principal move was the best move, but there was still a bit of analysis to do in that line, because the black knight gets trapped on the edge of the board, and you play your king d6, and then but you had to analyse, okay, if white plays king b4, if white plays king b5, if white plays e5, and a lot of your drawing tricks, what's the word I'm looking for? Not tricks. You're drawing. I hate it when I forget words. But yeah, G5 is your main sort of one of your main drawing resources. Maybe that was the word I was looking for. Anyway, it's interesting to see what was played in the game as well. Knight takes e4, king b5, and the knight comes to c5. Okay. And the trick, the tactic that was probably prepared by the guy playing white was bishop d4. And we'll pause the video. What would you do here? I reckon the guy playing white, who is it? Black. Sorry, Karpov's white. The guy playing black, when they just took on e4 instead of the principled knight takes a4, they had planned this. Wow, brilliant move. And this is now just a draw. King takes a4, king comes into f5. If the bishop defends it on e5, we've got g5 straight away. And if the bishop defends it on e3, we can still keep coming after all the pawns I mean, what does white do? King b5, king h3. It's going to be a draw. Okay, we're going to be able to use the h pawn to deflect the bishop off the defense of, with our king on g4, we're going to be able to put the g5 push. So we're covering both these squares, and yeah, you can see there's a draw. Unfortunately, he was playing Karpov, and Karpov saw that too, and so didn't play bishop d4. Wants to attack the knight, but he went this way. And now the knight takes a4 doesn't work if you go down the same line, because the bishop can defend the f4 pawn from d6. So, yeah, instead of knight takes a4, he came back to d7, bishop a4, king d5, and bishop e7, king d4, bishop to d8, and yeah, black ran out of moves and resigned. This pawn's falling, and again, this passed pawn's going to decide the day. Passed pawns usually favour the side of the bishop, especially if the side with the knight hasn't got one, which they haven't there. Right, so last but not least is this position. This is one of the exercises. I actually did rather well on this one, so, though I do say so myself. I sort of managed to get all the right winning ideas, so maybe I am learning something. It's black to play, reasonably open board. Again, got to favour the side with the bishop. Pause the video, work out what would you do. What's your winning plan? So one sort of reasonably obvious course of action is to just start attacking those queenside pawns where the white king's so far away straight away. So, bishop b2. White saves that pawn, of course, a4. And then you can come in with the king b6, king e1, king a5. The white king sort of desperately tries to get over, king b4, king c2. And the white king has got over, and black can just make no progress there. Okay. So that was tried. Oh, that could have been tried. Sorry, was tried when I was going through this game down the pub with Alex, in fact. Yeah, so we looked at that line, and then we looked at, well, we found the winning idea, which is to play b5 first. Okay, and what that does is that in a minute, when you're playing your bishop b2, if the a4 pawn push comes in, we can actually just swap. Okay, so king tries to get over, bishop b2, a4, swap. And it's not that we're going to come and collect the a pawn, it's that we're actually going to now just bring the king through to the c4 square and get that king in a really good position where the a4 pawn will actually still be weak. If king b6, king d2, and you do make a run for the a pawn, white's got king c2 hitting the bishop, bishop e5, f4, bishop d6, and then king b3. So, and that's just not as good. Okay. So yeah, king c6, king d2, king c5, and well, when we were analysing it, we didn't consider the next move, which was actually played in the game. We considered this line, king c2, and we basically found all the moves it sort of said in the book, which we were quite pleased with. So yeah, king c2, bishop d4 attacks the f pawn, f3, king c4, and it's just completely gone, including the pawn ending, which isn't a difficult one to analyse. Okay. Now, in the original position, the move order is important. If you play king c6 straight away, then white can bring the king over, king to e1, b5 to try and get the same thing going, basically. But this time round, after king d2, bishop b2, you've messed it up, because now white's king's close enough to try this little defensive tactic, where if bishop takes a3, king c3, and the knight and the king are guarding the bishop's escape. The bishop's trapped, so black has to play a5, b takes a5, and again, nowhere near as good for black. So the only move order that works is b5, king over, attack the a pawn, force it forward, swap, and then bring your king through the middle. That attacks the knight. Knight has to move. a5. This is how the game continued, by the way. Knight d6. King takes a4. Pass pawn. It's going to favour the side with the bishop. This is already minus 2.9 according to the engine. King c2, bishop e5, takes. We'll have that pawn as well, thanks. Knight comes back, attacks the e6 pawn. That's a long way, that distance, to get at the f6 pawn. And in the meantime, we've got a pawn on a5 that's going to get pushed down the board. Bishop's back in the game. That's just stopping the knight going to various squares. Nearly trapping the knight here if white's not careful. Yeah, and then white just sort of gives up here actually and starts playing nonsense moves. I don't really understand that one at all. I suppose it's just to come and get the e-pawn, is it? But the bishop just defends it, and yeah, it's just absolutely hopeless. And black just let the h7 pawn fall to trap the knight. We can probably even leave the pawn on a3 and come and collect the knight, can't we? It's trapped, and white's king can't do anything because there's a pawn 2 squares from promotion. So, in fact, that's the plan I just suggested. Isn't the checkmate in 14 that the engine's found, obviously, but apparently it's checkmate in 14 from there. So yeah, well done if you found that plan. b5 first, and then bishop b2. Yeah, I hope everyone got something out of that. That sort of open position favours the side with the bishop. The thing I got out of it the most when I was going through the positions is, all right, open position favours the side with the bishop, but how do I win it? Like, what's the plan? You know, I can put my king in the middle, but after that, what's the plan? And yeah, I think I might be able to come up with a plan next time I get a similar sort of position.